Okay, so we need to take a look at what we're creating in order to get an idea of where we need to place things and how we need to structure this page. So let's go ahead and open up our awesome preview here, and let's start and take a look at this modularly from the top to the bottom. So at the top here, we're going to have a header bar. So we'll be using the HTML5 element header. And within our header, we have a navigation bar here, so we'll use the nav element. Now below this, we're going to have 6 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. And then down here, we'll be using the, of course, footer elements to specify our footer down here. Now, that's the very, very basics of how we're going to break this down into what would be 8 sections, or really 9 if you include the menu within our header here. But obviously, we're going to be breaking that down even further. Within this, we're going to need 3 columns. We'll need, obviously, 2 columns here, so we'll get into all of that. But right now, that's going to be the basics. So what we can do is we can go back into brackets, and we can sort of hand code that out really quickly. So let's just start with our header. And if you recall, within that header, we're going to add our nav tags. Now, below our header, we're going to have 6 sections. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Six times, and then lastly, we're going to have our footer. Okay, so there we go, and obviously this is just preparing, but we're going to go ahead and tackle each one of these sections one by one, starting with our header, and then we'll move on and we'll get the nav within that header, and then we'll move down the page section by section until we get to the footer. So let's go ahead and we're going to start with our header content. So let's go back into Safari and take a look here. So at our top here, we have this white background spanning the entire width of the page. So regardless of how wide our page is, it's going to go 100%. And within that, we have our content divided into 3 separate sections. And it looks as this is probably taking about 80% of the page. So we need to make sure that we have some sort of container containing our content within our head section. So we can go back into brackets and we can create ourselves a little container within our header. So let's just create a div, and we're going to give it an ID, and let's just call this header container. And we'll close that div off. But let's make sure that within this div, we are going to contain our navigation as well. Oops. So let's go ahead and close that div. There we go. And as good practice, let's make sure that if we have a lot of space in between specific divs or really anything, we can make sure that we're commenting, and this is good practice. Make sure that you say where a specific div ends. So you could say header container ends here or something like that. All right, so we now have our header container, and we can start putting a little bit more content in here. Specifically, we need 3 different sections, and we need these 3 sections to be divided equally. So 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to create a class for those 3 sections, and this will be within our container. And let's just call that let's do a div class, and we're going to call it call3 for 3 columns. That way, when we apply the styles to one of these columns, it's going to apply to all 3, and it's going to make them all 3 the same width, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about when we actually create it. So we'll do that div. There's the first one. Now we need the second div, our second class 3 div, to contain this navigation. So we're going to do div class equals call3. And then let's close that div off around side our nav. Let's put the navigation on a new line just so we know. And I keep pasting in section here. That was supposed to be a closed div. Okay, so let's reiterate what we've done here. We have our header section, and this is going to encompass everything at the top of our page. Now within that header section, we've created a div of header container. This is going to contain the actual content. So it's only going to run from right here at this edge to the right side right here at this edge. It's not going to run the entire page. Now within that, we have created a column section, or column 3 divs, and these are going to be made up of 3 separate columns, and obviously we need to add one more of these. So let's do one more. And we need to make sure it's outside of this second column div. Okay, so there's our third one. Now if we look at our example, we have our 3 columns, column 1, column 2, column 3. And if you recall, our second column has our menu, or rather our nav, within it. So if we look at our second column, we have our navigation. This is where we'll put our navigation menu. Now let's go ahead and we'll start with our first column. This is going to be the very top one. Now inside our first column, we need to insert our logo. And really quickly, let's go to our main screen and make sure that your logo dark PNG, the one that you downloaded 2 lectures ago, is inside your awesome landing page images folder. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drag this inside. Great. Now let's go ahead and insert this image inside. And one other thing we can do is we can give this image a class, but for now let's just insert the image source, and we're going to do images, and then that's going to be logo dark, and we'll close that off. Now I want to show you guys something, because this image is quite large, and I'm going to show you guys really quickly how we can achieve retina displays of images. So let's make sure that we live preview this. Okay, so what we're seeing is a very big version of the image that we want, and we can see that it's pretty distorted. It looks blurry around the edges. Well, the way Retina works is it takes a large image, and as opposed to scaling the image down before you import it, it takes the large image and we give it a height and a width, and we let the browser scale it down. And what that does is it clears up all the pixels and it really makes it look great. So I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. Let's change the height and the size of this really quickly. So let's go height, and let's just do 18 pixels, and we're going to do the width, and the width is going to be 143. So I already measured this out, so I know that this is actually proportional. So let's save this and have another look in our browser. There we go. So we now have this awesome logo at the size that we want. We've scaled it down using CSS, and it's scaling down that larger image that we have saved in our images folder. So it's taking a large source file, and the browser is going to scale it down, and it's going to make it look a lot cleaner and a lot clearer. Now let's go back into brackets and let's add the content to our second class, or our second column 3, and this is going to be within our navigation. And within our navigation, we're going to have our menu. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use an unordered HTML list. And if you recall, the syntax for that is simply UL. And we could close that off, and let's actually go ahead and let's give this a class. And we're going to call the class, let's just do menu. Okay, that way we can refer to that within our CSS. Now within our unordered list, we need to specify our actual list items. Let's start with, let's do home, and then I'm just going to copy this, and we'll just do 4 items here. Features, about, and then the last one will be sign up. Okay, so now we have the bones set up for our menu, obviously with no styling. Let's move on and do our third. And our third is actually going to just contain a button. So let's move inside our third div here, and let's insert a button. And we're going to give this button a link. So let's do ahref. And let's just give it an empty link. So anytime we don't actually have a page or an external source that we want to link to, we know we want to link to it in the future, we just put in a pound sign, and that's going to make it so it's a link, but it doesn't actually link into anything. And we're also going to give this a class so we can style this button as well, and we'll call it get started button. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and write the content that we want to show up inside our button. Let's say get started, and that'll work. So let's save that. Let's take a look and preview this. Okay, awesome. So this is what it currently looks like, and we need it to look like this. So we're not even close. But what we do have is we have our logo scaled properly. We have our menu here. It obviously needs to run horizontally, not vertically. And we have our Get Started button, which needs a ton of different styling to look like this rounded green button. Well, that's fine. We've set up the HTML bones. Now let's go ahead and learn some CSS and play around with it and see how we can get it to look exactly the way we want.